Hey, what's up? This is Ollie Teeba. I'm a DJ, music producer, beat maker, founding member of the Herbaliser and Evon in the process, currently touring as live on stage DJ with the Herbaliser Band, and you are listening to the Liverpool Connection Podcast, music and football episodes.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Liverpool Connection Podcast. I'm your host Daz. This is my music and football episodes where I bring on a guest to talk about my two loves of life, and hopefully theirs is music and football. But today it's all about music. I first bought my guest's album back, I think it was 1995. I'm a massive Ninja Tune head, and his album came out on Ninja Tune and it blew me away. And to know that it was all basically samples that created the album is even more mind-blowing. Today I've got Ollie Teeba, original founding member of the Herbaliser. And it's great. I always, when I have a guest on, we usually have a nice little chat beforehand. Me and Ollie have chatted about our trainer collection.
Well, yeah.
And it's basically near enough the same. We've got boxes in every crevice of the house, and same with him and his 3-bedroom flat. So yeah, it's a good start when we're sneakerheads, as they say in America. But yeah, for me, your album took me like into a place I wanted to go personally, because a lot of like hip hop during that time was kind of a little bit sounding the samey, and trip hop, came along with your Portisheads and Massive Attacks kind of around the same time. But I do want to go back before all of that. Where does like your musical influences come from? Because I always like to know what was playing in your house as a kid, and did it have influence on you later on?
Yeah, definitely. I grew up with mostly black music in the home, whether it was played by white artists or black artists. My dad was into a lot of rock and roll music from the 50s and 60s. And my mum, who was a little bit younger than him, about 8 years younger than him, she was more, her whole thing was more soul. So she, loved like Al Green and Marvin Gaye and Otis Redding and all sorts of people. But also my dad, he was interested in tracing things back. Mm-hmm. And so he was like, he was just a kid growing up in the 50s who got into Elvis like loads of other kids, and then more other kinds of rock and roll music. But then, started to, I suppose when, the Stones came out and they, made a point of showing where their influences had come from, that they come from Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, etc. And I think that probably was something that inspired my dad to, trace things back. And so as a consequence, became more and more into old blues artists, black artists from America, and then further back into like Wynonie Harris, Cab Calloway, these original big band kind of jazz, blues, you name it. And he was really enamored of that culture and wanted to move us to America when I was a kid. And we went there once on a holiday, the only time I ever went on a holiday abroad, because we were like strictly, holiday in Wales, holiday in Bournemouth, like a lot of, working class families in the UK. But we got a chance to go to America, I think, because my dad was like, well, if I'm going to try and get us out here, I want to take the family out and see and it was just like amazing, in the 70s, late 70s, going to America and seeing that they had TV that ran all night. You could watch cartoons in the middle of the night, because we got there, in the middle of the night. We got the hotel and we could turn on the TV and there were cartoons on. And you could go to a supermarket in the middle of the night as well. And it's not just about doing things in the middle of the night, because I was like 9 years old, but that was an eye-opener. And it was just like being in a movie, and there were so many more things. There's more toys, more of everything. All the kinds of things that we take for granted now, because like everywhere on the planet, we're much more, at least, all of Europe is more like America than it was in the 70s. I think ever since 1980, where Thatcher and Reagan became, really solid pals, Britain just became more like America. So yeah, my dad was really, really enamored of Black American culture, and so I got exposed to all sorts of stuff on video that he would collect. And then as for developing my own interest beyond that, I was always into movies when I was a kid. I loved Star Wars like everyone else, but I was really into James Bond. But particularly I was like, I really like the music in James Bond movies, and because it had the music in Star Wars and stuff was fine and everything, but it was very sort of big orchestral, grandiose stuff, whereas the music of John Barry had a bit of a kind of slinkiness to it that I kind of liked, and that it wasn't entirely happy. It was slightly, creeping about. And then, just as a process of a kid with the first VHS player in the house, and you used to go to the VHS rental store, which usually, this is before chains, like Blockbuster and whatnot. And these stores were quite often like, one was a pet shop that did a side thing in VHS rental, and then another one was a shoe repair store and key cutters that did a VHS rental. But I remember in 2 consecutive weekends when I was about 11 or 12, I saw Dirty Harry and Enter the Dragon. And I can't remember which one was first, but I think it was Dirty Harry was first, and I made a point of, like, the opening scene. I don't know how familiar you are with the movie, but myself and Johnny Cuba are still totally obsessed with the music from the opening scene, where the sniper shoots somebody from a rooftop, and this sort of eerie sound with the heavy drums, and then it kicks into the psychedelic guitar. And I just like, this music is incredible. I need to, and I get there with the pause button. And I'm like, right, Lalo Schifrin. I've never heard of it. Even though I'd probably seen a number of things with Lalo Schifrin's music in, because he was from the late 60s through the entire 70s. He was composing scores for countless pictures. But I was like, this music, this kind of, it's got this cinematic quality, because each piece of music is being developed for a particular scene in a movie and needs to do certain things, but it's got this heaviness and this funkiness to it. And so that kind of settled in me. And then, later in that year, I started to hear my first bits of hip hop, Grandmaster Flash. The Message was like a chart hit. Buffalo Gals and Rocket. Those 2 records just, I was like, okay, this is for me. This is for me. I'm not getting bored of this. This is amazing. Scratching records, and then there was the b-boying and breaking, and I was all into that, and graffiti. So everything kind of fell into a hip hop culture sphere. But then when I first got my turntables, and I was, just trying to find breaks, both the breaks that people have made famous, and just trying to find my own breaks as well, that I hadn't heard, being cut up by Grandmaster Flash or anything like that. And then I'd sort of get my first sampler, and I went straight back into this soundtrack pile, because I had this collection of soundtracks anyway, and then I've been buying these funky records, and it all that's what kind of intermingled together to make the kind of sound that I'm always kind of trying to create in the music that I make, whoever I'm making it with. It's not to say every song that I make sounds like movie soundtrack music, but I'm definitely big into that sound. So people like, when I'd hear like Portishead, I'd be like, while this isn't the kind of record that I'm trying to make, I'm really appreciating their appreciation of the same kind of sounds that I like to dig for. And then at some point, after a year or two of having my own sampler at home and having made like tapes and tapes and tapes of loops, I then met Jake Wherry, who had his own studio, and I went in there on someone else's session, and it became sort of clear that we were both into a lot of the same sounds, and he got himself a sampler as well, and had a set up with a sequencer and whatnot, and like reel-to-reel tape and mixing desk. So I was like, right, okay, you've got a studio, you want to make music in this kind of fashion that I do, let's work together. And then we sort of, after a sort of couple of years of playing around, we made our first album as the Herbaliser for Ninja Tune.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I've read somewhere like Wild Style is like one of your favorite movies, and it kind of pushed you to know what you actually wanted to do. Yeah.
Wild Style is a massive part of my hip hop education, because it's a perfect encapsulation of hip hop culture as it was in early 80s New York, where all of the elements were in full swing, because of course breakdancing, I think in New York already by the early 80s, breakdancing was sort of seen as something that was on its way out, because I remember seeing something on TV in 1983 that was going, yeah, last year it was all breaking, now it's kick dancing, and there was all these guys doing all these high kicks in a club, and I'm like, but yeah, the clothes, the music, the graffiti, the everything, is right there. If you really want to figure out, what hip hop is beyond it being just a music, because a lot of people go, I'm into hip hop, but what they mean is I like rap music.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, the music that I make is part of a culture, and I will always have the most reverence and respect for that culture, especially as a white guy from London, doing my thing, within this. I'll always keep my head on straight as to where it comes from, and I would always feel quite annoyed or irritated by artists who would incorporate elements of hip hop into their music, but not really sort of, they would go, oh, well, it's not really hip hop. And whether people listening to the music of the Herbaliser, whether that's their takeaway from it is this is hip hop music or not, is that's their own personal deal. I know where the part that I contribute to that music, I know where it comes from. And yes, it encapsulates other influences that I have, like the soundtrack music and stuff, but it comes from hip hop. And also it's the only way I know how to make music is from what I taught myself as a DJ, and that kind of informed me how to arrange a record, how to block out sort of what your record does, where it drops, where, you know, and being that we were in a place where we were coming out in the mid-90s, when the UK music industry had pretty much turned its back on any idea of a UK version of hip hop. I think they felt like, oh, we've given this a try. We've given this our best shot. We can't sell it the way the American music sells. And they just really didn't try. And I was like, I find myself in a place where I want to make the kind of music that nobody wants to make. Well, I'll just do what I do until things change, and because we lived in Twickenham as well, which is sort of out in southwest suburbs. It's pretty white middle class. It wasn't exactly teeming with rappers, put it that way. So we didn't really know any MCs, and a lot of MCs that had gone before were sort of maybe in a bit of hiatus because there was no record labels that were really supporting it. So I was just like, I'll just work on this music with Jake. And then Jake was like, oh, I know a guy at Ninja Tune. And they listened to every tape, he says. So we sent them a tape. And they listened to it, and they liked it, and they got back to us, and then we just took it from there. I've completely forgotten what the point I was making, and Wild Style. I don't know how I ended up getting where I got to from Wild Style, but yeah, Wild Style is a massive, massive deal for me, and I still to this day collect Wild Style memorabilia, and pretty much each improved version of the soundtrack, or the break beats that we used, because back in the 80s there were no reissues of the Wild Style break beats that they had, these breaks that they'd made specially, recorded specially, because they knew that they weren't going to be able to get away with cutting up copyright material and get their film out. So they're like, right, we'll make break records for the DJs to mess with. And apparently, most of the breaks that they made were not that popular with, the various DJs that were in the movie. One in particular, Down by Law, which is why all of the MCs keep rapping on the same beat throughout the thing, was because that was the one that was like, oh yeah, that one. But yeah, like you couldn't. I knew someone who knew someone who knew someone that had a copy of the original, because they were just test pressings. It was never a commercially available record. But since the Music of Life, I think it must have been about 1990. Maybe it was earlier. Maybe it was 89. They did a reissue of all these breakbeats that they used in the film, and each time some version of that has come out, I've bought it again, because it's quite often the pressings get better. Like these days, when you buy a vinyl record, the pressings are generally pretty good, because vinyl records are really expensive now. So I don't think you could get away with what used to be, because people used to churn out vinyl in the 80s and early 90s. So there was a lot of stuff that was badly pressed. But like I bought quite a few like reissues or unearthed recordings and things of various kinds that people put out now. And yeah, they're 30 quid minimum each, but they're really lovely sounding records. So
yeah, I was an exchange student actually in New York in 1986.
Oh wow.
And that was the height of like Run DMC.
Yeah, I wish I'd known you. I'd have been bring me back a double goose jacket. Bring me back
let me tell you, Ollie, like I went to America in probably skinny jeans and just some old like Lacoste jumper, and I basically came back with baggy jeans, a big belt buckle, some shell toes, a Kangol. Like I was just immersed in the culture in America at that time, and I've obviously changed the way I look, but the musical style has always been with me. Like I love hip hop. I absolutely adore it because it comes from a place of heart and soul for me. And like you said, there's a massive difference, I think, between hip hop and rap music. There just is.
Yeah, I mean, rap music is just an element of it. It's not everything. And I've had discussions with people where they've gone, and I've been trying to convince them of some cultural element of it, and they've been like, well, it's just music. And I'm like, it isn't. Just like dub and reggae are not just music. They belong to a culture, that, and if you don't have any respect for that, because like it's, as we're going through this particular period of history at the moment, I'm seeing people all over the place that love black music, but they have no solidarity with black people. And I don't understand, I don't understand that. And I think it comes from just appreciating something at a surface level and not really caring about what made it, like the conditions that came about to create this thing. And while I don't want to get into particularly discussions about Africa Bambaataa, it doesn't, what he has done in his own life outside of, what the things he did that were great, that created hip hop culture and taking gang violence and turning it into something positive, that will always mean something to me. And the fact that he didn't live up to ideals that he'd set in place doesn't change how I feel about the culture. It changes how I feel about the man, but it, if anyone was to try and cast aspersions on the culture of hip hop because of his own behaviour, that it doesn't change anything for me regarding how I feel about this culture, because while he was a very important part, it's not. This culture is not about one person, which is interesting. It's something that the music industry always tries to do. And I think it's a lot of it's to do with racism and tokenism, that they'll try and raise one above everyone else. And you see that all over the place I mean, maybe it's not just confined to how the music industry deals with black culture, but I think it's a big part of it. But they will always try to go, oh, it's all about this particular person. Whereas it's about the massive spectrum of contribution from all sorts of different people. So, yeah, I can't remember what the question was again. It was, and whether I've gone off topic.
No, you haven't gone off topic. You know,
hip hop culture. Yeah, hip hop culture. It's something that I'll never. It's part of who I am as a person. Because I think when you're like 12, 13 years old and you decide this is for me, and it's not just a passing interest, because there's never been a year that I've not been interested. Yeah, there have been years where I felt like, the music that's being outputted at the moment isn't great, but I'm usually feeling like it's only because the next thing has yet to, the next iteration has yet to appear. Because I think, what happens with a great deal of anything that's popular is, someone shows you what you can do, and then everyone jumps on that sound or that particular way of painting or that particular way of doing this or that and then it can fall into a, like everything's just a sort of pale imitation of previous things, but then someone will be discovered doing it in a whole nother way. Like, for example, Primo, DJ Premier, massively influential beat maker and producer. For years, not everyone, a lot of people were trying to emulate the sound that he would make. And then Jay Dilla comes along and completely shows you another way, and then spawns his own Dilla likes, if you like, and that's largely to do with music industry as well, because when the music industry sees something that they think is going to be popular, they push it to the max because it's about money and making money, and that's not to take anything away from those two producers, because they are, whether they're the greatest there is not for me to say. And I generally try not to get into these sort of greatest of all time conversations, because that's like sports. I mean, that's literally where greatest of all time comes from, is sports. And this ain't sports and art. There are elements of things that are like sport within, but it's not a sport.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have that healthy competition, I think, in hip hop.
Exactly.
You have it's always been kind of that.
Yeah, there's a competitiveness.
Yeah, competitive, and what I liked about it in the beginning was listening to Grandmaster Flash. There was no bitches and hoes, but in their lyrics, it was about the day-to-day lives they were living. Yes, I'm a white kid from Liverpool that, like, there were if you look at it from the outside, you'd be like, why would you be listening to that music? But I came up in a time in Thatcherism as well, where nobody gave a shit about the northwest of England, and I grew up like middle class, wearing hand-me-downs, so I kind of related to some of those lyrics in the way I perceive them, While somebody will go, I don't even understand. You're white, they're black. I don't understand. It's like, well, it's what's written down. What they're saying relates to me.
They're human beings expressing human feelings and sentiments about the life they find themselves living. But I mean, this is something that any sort of successful music genre or artist is going to have that thing that could be universally appealing to even someone who is from an entirely different culture. So, I mean, within limitations of understanding lyrics as well, because it's like while I absolutely fully support rapping in your own tongue, in your own language, I can only gain so much appreciation for a rap song in a language I don't speak myself. That certainly isn't any, and I think that's the wonderful thing about the hip hop culture, is the strength that people, everyone's got their own little hip hop music industry now. It's like it's not entirely confined to America, because it's a culture that speaks to people, whether you're Japanese, whether you're a kid from London, a kid from Liverpool, kid from Nigeria. You still have things that happen in your life, and also it just sounds really good. And there's all sorts of things where you're like, these guys are so cool, I want to be just like them. And that's any sort of successful music is going to have elements of that. Like every kid in the UK in the 50s wanted to look like Elvis. Elvis didn't know anything about UK culture. He's not from, my dad was from South Shields. He's not from there. What does he know about? He doesn't. But he speaks to, he sang songs, and he mostly sang songs that, in fact, he always sang songs that other people wrote. I don't think Elvis wrote any songs, but what he had was, swagger. It would be the word that would be appropriate even back then, and is very much a word that has come back again. But yeah, he had a sort of, I don't care, I'm just doing me. And that is, ultimately that's the coolest thing, like being cool is, not worrying about being cool, or just like, I know what I'm doing. I don't need to care about what, other people who I'm not trying to speak to are thinking, which is how I was when I was a teenager growing up into hip hop, and, would deal with the kind of comments that you would deal with. And I'd just go, well, at the end of the day, they're humans, and I think that's the problem with the planet, is we've spent so many centuries being convinced by people with nefarious purpose that we are not all connected, and that some of us are less valuable than others, and should be treated as such. I didn't plan on getting into, kind of politics in this, but it is something I think about a great deal. The world we're living in at the moment is fucking depressing. But
Ollie, I look at it this way, because I live in America, and we all know what's going on over here. It's an underbelly of just, it's always been there, racism, always. It's just coming out more to the forefront because, of what's going on in government. But, you look back, only 60 odd years ago, black people couldn't go to restaurants. They had their own entrances. And, that's not 100 years ago. That's 60 odd years ago. And I think, you bringing up Elvis Presley too, because you had Little Richard before that, who, you know, he believes he was the king of rock and roll. I mean, Little Richard to me was amazing, amazing.
Little Richard is the king of rock and roll, really.
Yeah.
Elvis is Elvis being the king of rock and roll is just a marketing scheme.
Yeah.
But sorry, continue.
It's because Elvis was white, you know, and he got thrown to the front of the queue, while Little Richard was, you know, in the back going, you know, hey, what about me? What about me? And that's the thing is, you know, if you ask people back in the UK at the time, Elvis was number one because you barely
people think rock and roll is a white crip. It's look,
it's from the deep south.
I'll grant you that within American, the plethora of American rock, there is elements of all sorts of things as well. You know, there are elements of white and country music mixed in, but the groove, the attitude, the everything that's cool about it comes from black people. But I think, look, racism, you know, it's not just sort of to say, oh, you know, racism is really bad in America. Racism is everywhere. Like, you know, I'm sure you're aware of the narratives being espoused on mainstream media over here as well. Well, and, you know, we've got reform, not, you know, knocking at the door, threatening to take, you know, 10 Downing Street. You know, it's insane. I've never seen anything like this in my whole life. But I think in America it's a particular problem because they never fully dealt with that stuff the first time around. I mean, the reason why you had Jim Crow in the 60s is because they never dealt with the Civil War effectively, and then people were allowed, you know, just like 40 years after the Civil War had ended, starting to create narratives that were alternative. Oh, it wasn't about slavery. You know, you've got people who will argue that the Civil War wasn't about slavery, and it's just utter nonsense. But the fact that, you know, the South should have, God, we get really into it. The South should have been occupied, and you know, I don't know, but it's a lack of accountability every time that brings this stuff around again and again and again and again. And everything we're seeing in Israel is because of a lack of accountability. You know, and what's happening to the Palestinians is just, you know, you see it every day and you can't look away. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast. Yeah,
no,
because I could talk to you about all of that for and, you know, till the cows come home. I'm just, it makes me angry. It just, I don't understand.
Feel free to you know.
Oh, no. I
didn't want to get into politics on this.
Well, we have about
all the time anyway. You know, like Johnny Cuba and myself, Johnny Cuba is a dude that used to be in Dynamic Syncopation on this tune. He's actually Strictly Care's former brother-in-law, because he is married to a lady who is the sister of another lady who was married to Kev, but not anymore. Yeah, so, and Johnny's someone I've known for 30 years, and we've off and on used to make music, you know, even when I was doing the Herbaliser. But now that I'm not doing Herbaliser anymore, we are working on a brand new project called Evon and the Process, which is a rap. I will email you the Bandcamp link if you haven't already seen. Please give us a follow on Instagram because we're trying to make people aware of it.
Strolling is.
Strolling, yeah. Oh, you've heard it.
I love it. Yeah, I love it.
Oh,
Yeah,
that is really
what a voice!
That,
what a voice!
Yes, Evon is amazing, and so we're really enthusiastic about this project. We're all in it because, like, the idea that you can even make money doing music anymore is kind of for the birds, unless you're part of the 1%, because everything is that now. Unless you're part of the select group, most of us are in the out group who are not earning anything. And I'm earning something from things like Spotify because I've got, quite a lot of records that Jake and I made together on there, and they still get streamed, not as much as they did, because I think they tweak the algorithms, because you'll suddenly see like drop-offs, so you're no longer getting, maybe, I don't know really how it all works, but I know people do playlists and they do things where all of these things have algorithms where they go, oh, you like this, you might like this, right? So that's an algorithm that deliberately suggests something based on what other people, but they can tweak that. So I think, we are just going to see ourselves all earning less and less from this. But if you're in music for any other reason than you just got to do this, you're in it for the wrong reasons. If you're in it just for fame, and there are some incredibly talented people that are very, very focused on fame, but they also have talent. But there's way more people who are very focused on fame and money and no talent. And if you're doing it for either one of those reasons, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Your output is going to be more interesting if you've got something you want, that's in here that you've got to get out, So, we are all of the same mind. All of us have seen either diminishing returns or no returns at all from music. Evie is someone that Johnny and I actually worked with about 20 years ago. Like, if you've got my Short Order album that I brought out in 2015, it's got a track that I recorded in 2004 with Evie and Johnny. It was like a 6-track EP that we kind of shopped around, and we were trying to go for a more, arguably at the time, a bit more of a mainstream sound. I mean, the track that I featured on Short Order is a little bit outside of the style that we're doing with the rest of the EP, but no one was interested. I guess it just wasn't the right thing at the right time, because that's what success in music generally seems to be, is catching a wave that you didn't realise you were on. Like I was saying earlier, we never set out to make trip hop. I was trying to make hip hop records, but didn't really have access to rappers, so we just did this instrumental thing that happened to conveniently kind of fit in with some other stuff that other people were doing and get thrown into a section of the record shop that said trip hop on the little plastic thingy that sticks out of the records. But we never perceived ourselves as doing anything other than, what came naturally. Like, we were already making the music when someone goes, oh, you're making trip hop, and I'm like, am I? And I think that was the attitude of most of the people that were thrown into that it was a sort of a journalist came up with the name, and people thought, oh yeah, that's kind of catchy, because it's kind of ambient. A lot of it was kind of ambient and psychedelic, but it had hip hop beats. So, but I mean, I was like, my thinking was, well, this kind of sound already exists in hip hop. We're just sort of doing that kind of thing. But yeah, and we were on a label that got kind of caught that wave. So, I'm not gonna, bitch about it. I mean, I know when I was 25, I was like, can't people really see what I'm trying to do, man? You know, like, no, just be appreciative that people are paying attention, because at the moment we are in a battle for attention, all of us, because everyone's creating content now. That's not to say, oh, you only deserve to create things if you're recognised by a record label or an art dealer, you know, because that's how it works in art, right? You're not anything until someone of the special people says you're special, right? And then, you know, if they done that job particularly well, you'll be the most special. Well, look at Banksy, as opposed to all of the other artists. Do any of them get even a micro attention, you know, of what Banksy gets? It's no, you know, and there's nothing. I'm not taking anything away from any artist who's getting all of the cream. And in fact, you know, I'm sure he, you know, I don't know why I'm getting into a conversation about any particular person. I'm saying that, you know, you could become immensely popular and it was never your intent. Because if you actually have something unique to say, that attention, you know, with the right help, well, you know, it's like Kurt Cobain was very, you know, uncomfortable with sort of speaking as the voice of a generation. And he was, you know, he's a man with his own troubles. And you could tell wasn't in any way comfortable with the amount of attention. You know, those of us who can exist in a realm where you can do your thing with, and this is most people, only a reasonable amount of attention, where you just live the same ordinary life as everybody else, you know. But it must be awful to be the kind of person who's so famous they can't go to the supermarket. That would make me happy. So yeah, but you know, it would be nice to get a little bit of attention on the projects that I'm doing. The problem is most people only recognise the name the Herbaliser. You say the name the Herbaliser to granted, it's people of above a certain age now, but and they go, oh, you know, sometimes if they know it, and if they were listening to it when they're at college, or you know, but these days to get ears on new things that I'm doing is a lot more challenging, because you're just competing with so much more content.
Yeah,
you know, and that's something of an even playing field, really.
Well, there's so much music that comes out every single day that I find, you know, everybody can make their own music in the bedroom. You know, the new MPC sampler just came out. You know, it's $400 over there. I think like 300 and something quid back home. Yeah, but it does so much, and you can just spend hours upon hours on that.
Did you get one?
I'm getting one.
Right.
Yeah, I wanna. I've watched, you know, quite a lot of YouTube videos, and some of the mates that I've had on the podcast have said, you know, do you know At Jazz? Martin Iveson, he's a house music DJ and producer, and he was like, yeah, you got to get one of these, Daz. These are like, you know, I mean, for, you know, I've got my Korgs and everything, but I've never really like sampled too much.
Yeah,
I just see people I mean, the whole thing for me is just have fun with it.
It's so small that you could just bring it along as a DJ accessory, and make pretty decent use of it. I was looking at it and I was thinking, oh, you know, maybe because we use an MPC live in the Herbaliser Band show, because we're doing that again. We're out doing it live without Jake, unfortunately. But fortunately, we have a really good bass player called Connor. So, but yeah, we're doing that again. And I use an MPC where we have elements, we have stripped back versions of the tracks that we made. Sometimes there's just got drums and some effects on. Sometimes they've got a few loops in, but then the band is. I'm sure you know if you're a fan of the Herbalisers, you've heard how the band is different from the original DJing records. And I thought, oh yeah, the MPC sample would be a nice smaller version that I could use, but unfortunately, it's only got two just a left and right output, and I need more outputs, unfortunately. So, but yeah, I mean, it would be something if I was using a different device for playback, that it would be a great thing to have there just for doing some of that shit, on stage. I'm making fingering marks for with pad hitting movements for anyone who might just be listening to this on audio. I'm assuming this is a video podcast.
Video and audio, yeah.
It goes on both.
Yeah.
Yeah, so some people would, yeah. that explanation was for the people listening on audio.
Ollie was his hands really quickly.
Yeah.
But that's one thing, Ollie, like, that's why I love Bandcamp, right? Because you go down the rabbit hole and you find these artists that you weren't looking for in the first place, and you just go, holy shit, where has this artist been half of my life? And you look at their back catalogue and you're like, God damn, why aren't they, why aren't they listened to more? That's the thing. We live in a world, well, there's always been pop stars, that have been manufactured. Right said.
I used to ask myself this question when I was a little kid. I was like, why is the stuff in the top 10 so nonsensical? And why is all this other music that I hear gets nowhere near the charts? And now it would be different. The fix now would be different because it's all about algorithms and Spotify and streaming and all these different ways that you can consume music. But when you could only buy records from the store, I worked in record stores and I could tell you that the whole game was totally rigged. If you worked at a high street record store in the 80s or 90s, what you would have would be each record label / distributor would have a rep that would drive around. They'd have an area, like you get sales reps for everything, right? That sales rep would come to the store and they'd go, right, my boss says that I've got to get this piece of garbage single in the top 20, because once it's in the top 20, it goes on rotation on the radio, because once it's in the top 20, they're just going to keep playing it. So I'm not going to name the record store that I worked in. It doesn't exist anymore anyway, and I'm not going to admit to having done anything. But these are practices that I observed whilst working in record stores. And anyone who worked in a record store, in a high street record store, would be familiar with this practice. They come in and they go, right, and they've got to get a single in, hyped into the charts. And by hyped, they mean, can you run through some extra numbers on this thing? So you can chuck the record straight in the bin if you want, because that would be better if you actually haven't sold them, because should Gallup, who used to compile the charts at the time, come round and check your numbers of what you've been running through the little barcode scanner and what's on your inventory, because each record would have a inventory sort of sleeve where you would go, on this date, took in this many copies, so that if Gallup came and checked, they could check to see what your numbers written on the thing and the numbers that you've run through, and they needed to match. And if they didn't match, they take away a Gallup machine, and then those reps aren't coming into the store anymore. Because what the reps would do is they go, I need to get, for example, the Osmond Boys into the charts. And for a few months, they had every 11, 12-year-old girl coming in. They all wanted Osmond Boys, Osmond Boys, Osmond Boys. And previous year, it had been New Kids on the Block. That's how far back we're going here. New Kids on the Block with the thing. And then Sony introduced the Osmond Boys, who are all sons of the original Osmonds, right? And Take That was then something that BMG would try to push the next year, and no one had heard of it. Mm-hmm. But what they did is they got someone like me, not me, someone like me who's working in a record store to run through the numbers. Because what they would do is they would go, right, we'll give you a box of this album on CD for free, and it's TV advertised this week. So they would go, right, we need this single to go into the top 20. Bob Marley Legend is currently, quite often it would be like, a hits album or something. It's TV advertised, and once something's on TV adverts, it's flying onto shelves. Even if it was been there for years and years and years, once they do a TV ad campaign, it would fly. They would go, right, we'll give you 2 free boxes, 50 CDs of Bob Marley, which you can sell for £13 or whatever a CD was at the time, and they've cost you nothing. It's pure profit, and all you got to do is be a little bit dishonest about these singles that we're punting. And I can tell you that Take That, no word of a lie, because what they're doing in my store, they're doing in the store in the next town, and the next town, and the next town, and the next town, all across the country. Get it in the top 20, and then it's on the radio, and then all the people just go, I hear it on the radio all the time, so I have to buy it. I would literally have people come in the store, sometimes go, I hate this record, but I hear it all day at work, every day, and I don't know whether they thought that they're somehow going to exercise this demon by buying it. Maybe if I buy it, it'll stop playing. I don't know, but people they get the earworm or something, and they go, yeah, I have to buy it, because it's just rotation, and that's the thing that's, I think, is the same, is you just keep plug in at something until it, and if you can carpet bomb, then great. That that's something I observe on the level with underground hip hop, is carpet bombing is. Sorry, I shouldn't use such a laden phrase, but just bringing out something and then not waiting a year or 2 years before you bring out something else. Bringing out something 2 months and then another 2 months. Something, I see my man Jay Cyanide is doing really good, getting lots of, currency in the entertainment attention economy by, just constantly releasing projects. And I'd seen, like the Griselda, all those guys, West Side Gun and Conway and Benny the Butcher, by just releasing loads and loads and loads and loads of records all the time. It was impossible to ignore them. So that's going to be our plan. And as long as we can afford to, because our only costs are getting the thing mixed, because we're not really, we always used to do vinyl. Like, we used to be insistent on, we've got to have records of this. And first of all, vinyl's really, really not good. Not good for the environment. Really, really bad for the environment. But also for the fact that, to make 500 copies of just a 7-inch, the cost is mind-blowing. So we're like, we just can't afford to do this and be sitting on, I'm still sitting on records that I made 15 years ago that I made myself that didn't have distribution. Sell one every couple of maybe sell like 3 in a year or something. And so we're like, right, we can't do that because it takes too long, because there's so much process you've got to go through even before you're cutting the record, and then you may be on a waiting list to get the thing pressed. So by the time you get it actually out, physically have it in your hands, it's like 18 months old. So this time, our plan was, with Evon and the process, is we're just going to keep releasing one song every sort of 6 weeks or so. So we've released this sort of stack of 6, and already after a week, it's people are, their attention is, someone else has grabbed the attention, because it had some really good engagement for the first few days, and now it's dropped off significantly. So doing vinyl and shelling out loads of money for vinyl in that situation is crazy. So we're adopting a new model, which is making vinyl on order. Which, if you've been to our Bandcamp page, you'll see that we do a lathe cut 45 with 2 of the tracks from the EP, and probably we're going to do this with each song we bring out. We're going to go, right, this new song is on a lathe cut EP with a lathe cut 45 with maybe one of the other songs from the EP. We're not really sure, but we're basically like doing bespoke vinyl, which you would think, it's really, really expensive, but you could actually get one 45 with an A/B side and no artwork for a pretty reasonable price. And if you're only making what you're getting orders for, then you're actually doing okay. So what we're hoping is, by putting out a new song each month, posting all about it on Instagram and whatever, we'll draw some people back each time to the Bandcamp page, where they'll go, oh, there's some other songs. They know about that. They have a listen to them, and maybe they buy the EP, maybe they just buy a couple of songs. But as long as you keep, because that seems to be the thing, is that you have to keep, because that's the thing about it. You do a podcast, right? So if you don't broadcast with any irregularity, then that space in the attention that you're getting from someone else gets filled by another content creator. Mm-hmm. So it's the same with everything else. You've got to keep hammering at it and hope to keep people engaged. But it's quite a trick, But we think that we're doing some of the best music that we've ever done. So, hopefully some people listening to the podcast will come and check us out on Bandcamp, Evon and the Process.
Yeah, definitely. Go to the Herbaliser
Band. EVONAndPROCESS. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry, you were speaking. I just wanted to make sure that people got the spelling so they could search for it.
Yeah, and go to theherbaliser.bandcamp.com as well.
And also check out the Herbaliser Band at Instagram, because that is where you'll get any information about upcoming live shows. You won't get it from the Herbaliser's Instagram because we don't have the login for that. Someone else has got the login for that. I'm not gonna get into anything, but yeah. So any information you're looking at to see the Herbaliser Band live, then go to the Herbaliser Band Instagram.
Well, what does the future hold for the band and you, Ollie?
Well, the band, we are just we're trying to rebuild the audience, which is still somewhat present. They're still there, but we're fighting the same battle that everyone else is fighting, because I've seen this happen to a number of artists who I thought were really popular, where they've had their show cancelled or postponed and moved to a later date, or they've had their show moved to a smaller venue because people just can't afford to go out because the ticket prices. I mean, I don't go out to see a lot of shows, but from what I hear, the ticket prices are pretty high, and then there's booking fee for everything, plus going out for a night. If you're going to have a few drinks, or maybe you're going to go out for a meal as well before the show, you're talking about a lot of money when no one's earning a lot of money. Well, some people are earning a lot of money, but most people are not earning a lot of money. So because we were away for 5 years, Jake and I ended our professional relationship in 2020 during lockdown. So the Herbaliser Band is just, we figured, well, we may as well, while there's an audience for it, continue while we're, still able to, because most of us are getting on a bit. And, sitting on a splitter van for hours and hours and hours when you're in your 50s can get a bit uncomfortable. You get out and you find your knees locked up or something. Not that I'm complaining, but yeah, it's not as glamorous as it's cracked up to be. But we are, we're doing shows, and just trying to keep that audience alive, and also beyond that, because lots of people now are coming to shows and bringing their kids, because they're like, you should see this, you dig it, and a lot of those kids are really feeling it, and so hopefully we're expanding on that original audience a little bit.
Well, will there be any new DJ mixes coming out? Because obviously, you did the big fabric one, Solid Steel. Will there be any released?
I doubt it. I mean, these days, I used to DJ a lot, to the point where I'm like, I wish I wasn't so busy, because there was a period of time where I seem to always be, every couple of weeks, I'm getting on another plane to go somewhere. And I know that sounds, like I'm moaning about, but honestly, most people travel on a plane like a couple of times a year when they go on holiday. And if you flying on a plane every month, it's just, airports, you're just like, oh, for God's sake. And it's really stressful because you're like, are my records going to come out the other end? Or, back when, I was using Serato and stuff, is my laptop going to fail me or something? Or is this the time that I turn it on and it goes, I don't want to work with this old mixer anymore, because that time will always come where you're like, I've just updated the software, I've plugged it into the new mixer, it's falling over. And then you realise it's, I bought a Rain 70, it's just a couple of years ago I bought the Rain 70 because I'd had a 62 for years and years, and it continued to work way beyond, official support. And then just as we were gearing up to do the first new Herbaliser show, I plugged it in and the whole thing just fell apart. It wasn't working at all. It was jittering all over the place. And I'd run out of road there. So I had to buy new equipment. So, but, what was God, I keep forgetting what I was making. Anyway, we had 5 years off, and now we're rebuilding and trying to build on top of what we had. But it's going to take us a little while to get back to where we were pre-COVID, because I was talking about DJing, wasn't I? Yeah, I used to be really busy, and then around 20 years ago, maybe about 15 years ago, I was still busy, but the fees were literally half of what I'd been getting in the 90s. And it was fine because I'm like, it's still workable if I'm getting enough work. And then COVID happened. And after COVID, everything was different. The landscape was utterly changed. I've had very little in the way of like paid DJ offers since we came out of lockdown. I haven't had an agent for quite a few years. That was when the first drop off happened. Is I no longer had an agent, or I had various people that I had that ran small agencies that would get shows for me rather than a major representation. But after COVID, so I mostly DJ at like mates things, like, oh, do you want to come and DJ with me in this bar? I'm like, yeah, all right, God. Or DJing, doing an art show. Like my brother is doing an art show, art opening in a couple of weeks, which I'll be DJing at. So I tend to do things like that, which, to be honest, I find less anxiety inducing than, because I used to really suffer from anxiety of either tech fails with when I was using a laptop to DJ with, but when I went back to DJing with vinyl about 15 years ago, just general worry about audiences, and I would always worry. It's all, even when we were, pretty popular, I always would worry about audiences because there's always someone who books you that doesn't know their audience right, or what they're going to be into, and they're literally just picking names they recognise. And I would turn up and they go, "Oh, you play this kind of?" I'm like, "No, I do this." Like, oh, I'm sure it'll be all right. And most of the time it would be, but I would always get anxious because it bothers me when you get people who are kind of aggro about the fact that you're not playing the music that they like. Even if they can see a full dance floor in front of them. And I'm like, then quite often I would go, well, they like it. So, yeah, I don't miss that at all. So I think doing smaller things suits me. Although, I wouldn't mind earning, because that was definitely something that kept me, financially fluid, was that I always had, because I never was sure whether the royalties were going to suddenly drop off, but as long as I had the DJ work coming in, then I had a sort of regular wage. But after COVID, that ended. So yeah, now I just kind of we're doing the Herbaliser Band, and hopefully at some point that will become profitable. But at the moment we're rebuilding, so it's we're going out, we're doing the work, and we're as good as we ever were. I'm definitely convinced of that we're as good as we ever were, and people definitely, the feedback you get at the shows is definitely like, you got new people coming that never seen it before, and old people coming, not elderly people, but old fans, and they're like, they're like, oh, I saw you back when I was 18 in 1998, and I'm back here, and this is as good or better than it ever was, So we're for a bunch of old men, we represent ourselves pretty well on stage, I think.
Well, I suggest that anybody, again, if you're in the area and you see the Herbaliser Band coming, please go check them out. But Ollie, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, mate.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope I didn't rabble too badly.
No, it was really good. Always say an hour goes by quickly when you're talking about things that you're passionate about, and you've hit the nail on the head on many things that this is the biggest thing for me for the podcast, is to bring on a guest and let them talk. Nobody wants to hear me waffle on. I love the stories of how albums were created, how a band was formed, this and that. So yeah, you've checked all the boxes, mate. So thank you so much.
Well, it's like I say, pleasure. Always nice to talk about these things that we did back in the day, and reminisce. It's and also to just talk about my own personal philosophy about creativity, and so I hope that your listeners will enjoy it.
I'm sure they will. And thank you, listeners. Please like, subscribe, put your notifications on. And as I leave you every single time, please take care of one another. Stop being arseholes. Be nice. Stay healthy. And we'll see you next time.